Um, Welcome to David and welcome to everybody here with us today. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Sally Belford and I'm the Digital Marketing Specialist at Mattero. And this is David Roberts, who is Head of Counselling New South Wales at Support for Lawyers and a family law mediator with extensive experience working with lawyers.
And thanks for inviting me, Sally, and welcome to all you very busy lawyers who've made time to join us today.
So I'd like to begin today with an acknowledgement of country. I acknowledge the Yagara and Turrbal people who are the traditional custodians of the land where I live and work, and I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands that everyone is joining us from today. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and future, and I extend that respect to any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here with us today. 8th of September is Are You OK Day, which aims to foster a sense of belonging and encourage people to reach out when they need help. For those of you who aren't familiar with us, Mattero is legal software for sole practitioners, startups, in-house legal teams and barristers. And Support for Lawyers is a confidential counselling service by mental health professionals who understand lawyers and the unique issues associated with working in the legal profession. We wanted to explore this day in a meaningful way and empower our audiences to feel prepared to have the Are You OK conversation with the people in their lives. It's not uncommon to be reluctant to ask the question because we might feel we don't have the tools we need if the answer is no, I'm not okay. I'd like to note that if anyone does need to leave this webinar because of the sensitive nature of the subject matter, you are very welcome to do so. After the webinar is complete, we will be sending an email to everyone registered that will include some information on how to contact Support for Lawyers and some other mental health resources. We'll also send the link to the recording of this webinar. If anyone has any questions, we'll finish up with a Q&A. So please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box and we'll answer them at the end of the session. All right, so David, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome, very welcome.
Let's start by talking about why the legal profession experiences such a high rate of mental health challenges. What are the risk factors for lawyers and other legal professionals?
I guess the number one risk factor is actually being a lawyer. I mean, the Law Society rates family law practitioners or legal practitioners. It's in one of the top 2 categories of professions that experience mental health issues. And so if you look at that and you say, well, why is this the case? You know, the profession itself results in a lot of ongoing stress. And you can look at these in 2 different ways. There's external stressors and internal ones. So the external ones are ones that you're all out there probably very familiar with. You know, it's the high caseloads, long hours, high billing requirements and so on. There could be pressure from the courts in terms of times and preparation of documents, pressure to actually get information from clients who's not always forthcoming, and pressure, of course, to do well in your cases. Clients themselves can be a source of pressure in another way in that they themselves are often stressed or highly de-stressed. And as such, stress is a bit of a contagious kind of thing. And so lawyers can easily suffer some kind of vicarious trauma as a result of this state of being of their clients. So there are some of the external stressors. If you think about the internal ones and you think about who becomes a lawyer, all of you out there, high achievers, to a fair extent, perfectionists, because you need to be very detail oriented. And often you're trying to do that in an environment which isn't very necessarily supportive of all of that. So there can be internal stress in terms of trying to be the kind of lawyer you want to be in an environment that may not be as supportive as you want it to be. A couple of other things that's interesting, like Dr. Bob Murray, who's a clinical psychologist, has been doing some research. And he says that lawyers tend to be pessimistic because the training is to look for where the problems are and look for what's wrong. And so be pessimistic about things. And another interesting part of his research is that there is a connection genetic connection between pessimism or people prone to pessimism. And so individually, you could be in that category. And then more recently, of course, you think about the environment. We've had COVID over the last 2 years, and that's resulted in a huge amount of change in the way people practice. On Zoom, not meeting clients face-to-face, not going into the office, changes to the family court as well, amalgamation of the courts, a lot of new things that have happened there that add to the stresses. And when you think about it, where do lawyers receive any training about how to deal with this? I'm not aware of any training within law degrees and so on for dealing with it. So all of these stresses, but very little training in terms of how to manage them.
So what are some of the signs to look out for that could indicate that somebody might need help?
Overall, you can experience yourself or see in others a change of mood, a change in the way that they are. They might be talking more about being overwhelmed, or they might be talking more about feeling a bit helpless about the situation that they find themselves in. Again, you can look at different aspects of what people might be experiencing. There are emotional symptoms, showing less interest in things that people are normally interested in. You have those social conversations and they're normally interested in this. So I've lost all my interest in that. I'm not interested in that anymore. Broadly, just somebody who's their normal happy selves are now quite quiet or withdrawn. Their mood is kind of fairly flat, or they're having ongoing conversations about feeling anxious about things. So there again are some of the emotional symptoms, if you like. The physical ones are a bit easier. Dealing with sleep or lack of sleep, not being able to get to sleep, waking up too early in the morning. Again, the Law Society talks about intrusive memories of clients or experiences of clients. So you're thinking about this client case and you can't get it out of your mind. Or it might be that you really want to help this client, but there are professional and ethical barriers to going that far. So there's some internal kind of tension there. And in no time, you have unexplained aches and pains, shoulder pains, neck pains, often stomach pains, and digestive problems. And then, you can also experience big changes in appetite, loss of appetite, or gain in appetite. You start eating all of those comfort foods that we're also familiar with, or you're just not interested in food at all. And broadly speaking, a decrease in your energy, feeling tired all of the time. And then another category in terms of like mental symptoms, there are just things to look out for, like, is your memory getting poorer than you're normally experiencing it? Are you finding it difficult to concentrate? Are you finding it difficult to make decisions? And so these are all things which, the way we're constructed, stress and some of these symptoms are kind of normal in a way over a short period of time. But when you start experiencing these symptoms over a prolonged period of time, that's when you need to start thinking about help. And if things get really serious and you even start to think about, is it worth continuing, suicide ideation, you want to seek help definitely straight away. But these other symptoms, as soon as you think that they're going on for a longer time than usual, it's good to seek help early rather than waiting until it develops into something more serious.
Okay, so Are You OK Day aims to break the stigma around mental health challenges and help people to build support networks. But it might be really difficult for some people to start that conversation because they might not feel like they have the tools to handle it if the other person says no, they're not okay. What are some important things to remember if you're asking somebody, are you okay?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because if someone says they're not okay, what do people do? And there's this wonderful professor in the United States, Professor Brené Brown, who says, don't silver line it. And so what does that mean? Often we resort back, somebody says, they're not okay, they're having this difficult time or that difficult time. And one responds with, oh, yes, I had a time like that. I had a time when it was really terrible and so on, but I got through it. So you'll be okay. Or there might be a tendency to deflect, say, yes, that sounds terrible. I gather your daughter did really well at high school, or your son won some sporting event, and deflect that. These approaches, which are sort of under the banner, if you like, of sympathy in a way, don't really work because they kind of minimize the experience that the person is going through. So what you really need is an empathetic approach. And what is that? That's really standing alongside the person who starts to say that they're not okay. And just saying things like, well, that doesn't sound very good. Would you like to talk about that more? And very gently exploring that. But what's really important in this is to set up a strong and safe relationship with them. It might be somebody you know well, and that's easier. It might be a colleague that you don't know so well, so you have to work on that a little bit. But essentially, you don't try and fix the problem. Don't say, oh, what you need is yoga. That's really, I found that terrific. Or I meditate twice a day. You ought to do that. Or I've got a fabulous dance class. We have a lot of fun there. Why don't you come and join us? So that's like putting a Band-Aid over the problem. And it's kind of not really genuinely connecting with the person. The empathetic approach, where you stand alongside them with their pain of what they're going through and have a supportive conversation, which might lead to you suggesting that they seek professional help.
You mentioned while we were preparing for this session that it might also not be unusual for someone to be really uncomfortable to answer honestly when they aren't okay, even if they are struggling. What should people do in that instance when somebody says they're fine, but you think they might not be?
Yes. We have this, we have this wonderful Australian expression. We say, how are you going, mate? All right. And so you actually provide the I'm okay answer before the person can even speak, But often people will say they're okay when they're not, because of the stigma attached to that and the lack of safety. I mean, we don't go around showing our vulnerabilities too easily to people. So if somebody says they're okay, but you've noticed some of those symptoms that I've talked about earlier, you've noticed that they're arriving constantly late at work perhaps, or they're not concentrating the way that they normally are, or they're not the happy-go-lucky person that you normally see them as. You might refer to those symptoms and you might reply with something like, oh, that's good to hear. I was just wondering because I noticed, and then pick out one of those things that you've noticed. And then again, begin to explore that. So I noticed that you don't seem to be yourself these days. Would you want to talk about that? Or that you are having difficulty in preparing the papers for court more than you normally do. Is there something going on? With very gently opening up that discussion and keeping the same principles at play, that safety, confidentiality, big one, and building that relationship, which may then lead to them opening up enough that that you can suggest the kind of help that they can get. Again, don't try and fix it yourself, steer them towards some professional support.
If somebody does need more help or support, how can they access that?
Well, there are really well-known organisations out there, like Beyond Blue, like Black Dog Institute and so on. But the value of support for lawyers, and I have to put in a plug for us here, because is that this is an organisation set up that with people and counsellors who know about the legal profession. And so they have a good idea of the kinds of experiences that lawyers are having. And you can access that simply by going on their Support for Lawyers website. And you can access it individually because there's an email address there and so on, and you can say that you'd like to make an appointment. Or for those who might be watching this webinar who are directors of a firm, you might want to actually set up a package with Support for Lawyers, like an EAP program, so that you can set that up, talk to your staff about it, and tell your staff that you are concerned about their well-being. And so you've set this up, and they can access it within as many times as they like. But that it's completely confidential. You as the director or higher up in the law firm don't need to know who's accessing it, because that's the most important thing, that there is complete confidentiality around this, because otherwise people will be concerned that this will go badly in terms of any promotion, etc., etc. So completely confidential support for lawyers. If things are really, really serious, like you start to, as I said, have those sort of suicidal ideation, just go straight to 000 or Lifeline, because they're set up with those kind of organisations. But by and large, individually, and the package for a law firm seems to be a really good way to know that you tell your staff that you're really supporting them in this.
So what are some self-care and at-home actions that the people here today can take to help support their mental health and help cope with stress?
Well, I guess there are lots of things that you can do at home, and probably a number of people watching this webinar may be doing some of them, but exercise, of course, is really good because it kind of deals with all of the stress hormones that are coming up. But you don't have to become a gym junkie or, go boxing every day or so on. Just a reasonable amount of physical exercise. And a simple thing too is to go for walks. Take the dog for a walk every morning, but do things kind of regularly. That's really it. And where you can go for a walk, try and do it in an environment where you actually put yourself in a nice natural environment. Walking through a forest, walking along the foreshores. There are lots of harbour walks that you can enjoy. I go for a walk down through my local woodland area, down to my local park in the mornings. It's wonderful. Just being in touch with nature really helps in that way. Other more mindfulness exercises, meditation, move towards yoga if that interests you. Just doing something that actually takes your concentration completely away from the world of work, because part of this is all about a work-life balance. Move your concentration completely to something else that you enjoy, physical exercise, and keep an eye on your diet at the same time. Yeah.
Okay, let's answer some questions. Let me just get the Q&A box up here. Sorry, folks. Did anyone have any questions they'd like to put into the Q&A? Now is an opportunity for you to do that if there's anything you'd like to know more about.
I think it's just really important that people just acknowledge that they're working in a highly stressful profession and don't minimize it. Just accept it and keep an eye out for the signs of when you will have days when you're stressed and so on, and that's normal. But it's when it's happening over a prolonged period of time. Our whole biology is designed for some stress, and that's a good thing. It's a motivator, but experiencing it over a long period of time is what's damaging.
Fantastic. Well, so we've got a question that's come through here. Is there a time when you know you need to take control as someone isn't coping but doesn't acknowledge it?
Yes, that's a difficult one, and you may get to that stage, but I would try everything else first in terms of trying to create that environment to talk with them about it, for them to open up, and for them themselves. Really what you want is for them themselves to come to some realization that, yes, they need support. Taking control of it depends a little bit on the circumstances. If you were talking about, not talking about being at work, but if you had a family member, a child, a son or a daughter and so on, then maybe it's more easy to move into that taking control of the situation. Make sure they go to a GP, get an assessment, maybe get a referral for 5, 6 mental health appointments. But it's hard for anyone to work with somebody who doesn't acknowledge that they've got a mental health issue.
Yeah. Do you have any particular advice for a small firm practitioner?
Advice about, I guess it depends on what the advice is about. The advice about dealing with stress, well, most of those things that I've talked about today. I mean, you know, to me, the idea of a package that you could talk to your rest of your staff about and say that part of what you are trying to do in your small firm practice is to make sure that everybody is looked after would be that. I mean, lots of firms have EAP programs, and so support for lawyers is like an EAP program. But also you could just, without that, open up conversations about mental health, put it on the table. You might have meetings, you know, with all of your staff at times who say that today, let's just talk, you know, it's are you okay day, but every day is really are you okay day. But just open up the conversations. Don't keep the idea of mental health as something which is a mystery or under the table. Open up and have conversations about it. Because the more you do that, the more you normalize the fact that there will be stressors and there will be times when people are down, and it's okay to acknowledge that you're going through something, you know. But it's very hard for people to do in a sort of competitive professional environment like the law.
Yeah. How important is workplace culture in enabling staff to seek help?
I think workplace culture is incredibly important, you know, because again, if there's an acknowledgement that we work in a highly stressful profession, and there will be times when people are not okay, we want to have a workplace culture where that is acknowledged and their not okayness is supported. And it's supported in a way which can be confidential for them. Like I say, we don't go around exposing our vulnerabilities to all and sundry because it may go against us in some kind of way. But to have a workplace culture where, yes, we talk about these things, you know, and it's okay to talk about these things. You don't have to talk about yourself individually, but you can talk about, you know, this is like a stressful environment, and we will all at some stage be stressed, and we want to keep an eye out on, is this an ongoing situation that's leading to some kind of mental health issues? We know that stress leads to mental health issues, depression being the most common of those. And so we've set up a structure in our firm, you know, to deal with this. And it can be done in a confidential and supportive way, because we want all of your staff to be working at their best capacity. And so have it as an open conversation, and that's part of workplace culture.
How would you approach someone you know is someone you know that is inherently ignoring their emotions to prioritize their work and family?
That's a really, really good question, because that often is the case, that people are sort of in some kind of denial, you know, about the situation they're in. And I think approaching them on the basis of your concern for them and just what you're noticing about them. Go back to, look, I know you're doing well, but I keep noticing also that you seem to be under a lot of pressure this way or that way. And, you know, I noticed some changes. You seem to be down in your mood a little bit these days, or, you know, you don't seem to be joining in the way you used to, or whatever. Just think about those kind of symptoms to open up the conversations, and to really put it to them that, you know, you really want to support them, and you don't want to see them go down a path of not recognizing the issues that they're facing, and that turning up being much worse down the track than it is right now. And that's that conversation about getting support, getting help early, rather than waiting until it's too late. You know, the classic toothache, I've got a bit of a toothache, I'm not going to deal with that. Well, you might have a little filling, or you might need to fill a very large cavity, you know, with a big filling, or have the tooth removed. So don't wait, deal with it early, and try to encourage them to deal with it early in their best, their own best interest, and not just their own best interest, the best interest of their family and their work. That's what they're in denial, supporting their family, supporting their work, but actually you've got to let both down if you can't look after yourself.
Yeah, I like the analogy of the toothache as well, because, you know, our mental health is as important as our physical health, and it's really hard sometimes, I think, for people to acknowledge that.
Yeah, it is, because it's kind of like it's not obvious, you know. It's these things about mood and memory and so on. If you've got a sore arm, it's obvious and you can get it fixed. But it's also the fact that it's accepted to have physical injuries, you know. And part of this, you know, there are all of those physical symptoms. And so you can go to your GP and talk about your physical symptoms. And then out of that might come a referral for a mental health plan. And of course, Support for Lawyers can work with you on that.
Last question, I think. If somebody has a tendency to feel victimized and over-personalized bad things that might happen, how can you help them become aware of this over time?
So feeling victimized and, sorry, I didn't get the other one.
And over-personalize the bad things that happen.
Right. So this is part of what I guess Dr. Murray might have been talking about, that they're very pessimistic, you know, and they take everything personally and so on. And so again, opening up the conversation with them about that. I've noticed that you, and don't say seem victimized all the time, but you seem very down all of the time about things that are going on. And I worry about you. I'd like to support you. Can we be really helpful maybe to have a conversation about that? So again, very gently open up the conversation. And as I say again, don't try and fix it. Don't try and silver line it. Try and be with them in that kind of pain that they're experiencing, that sense of like the world is again against me. And just saying that you notice that and you're wanting to check in with them. And, you know, maybe they won't open up straight away. But the point is, and I should have mentioned this earlier, that when you check in with people and you go through all of this process, be sure that you check in again with them later on. Don't just do it once and then leave it. Check in maybe, because it might take a couple of times checking in with them, that they actually know and trust that you're really talking to them in their best interests.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's all we've got time for, but thank you so much, David, for taking the time to speak with us today. We really appreciate your time. And thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I hope all of those that have joined the webinar in your busy times have got some good value out of this, and that it can help you deal with all of the stress that I know is inherent in the work that you do.
And thank you to everybody who's joined us today. We will be sending a follow-up email to everyone who's attended that will include a link to the Support for Lawyers website and other resources, including a recording of today's session. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. And we appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks, Sally. Thanks, everybody.